Welcome and thank you for tuning in to the Visit the Northeast of Scotland podcast with me, your host, Jacqueline Akker. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Debbie Cooper, who is the Development and Promotions Officer for the Dee District Salmon Fishery Board and River Dee Trust. Debbie joined the team in 2021 to increase awareness and the use of the River Dee, one of Aberdeenshire's most treasured rivers. Debbie will tell us about the salmon preservation programs as well as rewilding and environmental conservation work being undertaken by the Trust. The River Dee is famous for its salmon fishing, and Debbie shares what makes the river perfect for the sport of angling and other adventures that can be enjoyed on or near the water. Debbie, thank you very much for joining me today and the podcast, and I'm really looking forward to finding out more about the River Dee and the River Dee Trust and the work that you do. So can you get us started by giving a brief introduction about you, your role, and the work that you do?
Yeah, certainly. I'll try in a nutshell. It's good to join you today, Jacqueline. Thanks for inviting me to be part of your podcast. Yeah, so the River Dee, I started working for the River Dee back in the beginning of April last year in 2021. And my role with the river is twofold, really. It's to promote the angling side of what we do on the river, but also to promote our conservation and habitat and education projects. So I wear a couple of different hats, which I'll explain as we're chatting. But yeah, so I've been with the river since last April. My background was in tourism and also in working with small businesses and the digital marketing side of things. So I kind of bring my tourism passion into the job and my digital marketing passion into the job to hopefully help the river to promote itself worldwide and all the things that we're doing. So yeah, really varied job.
What responsibilities do you have within the river? How do you promote it?
So the promotion side really is around the angling. The River Dee it's a long river. It runs from the source up in the Cairngorm Mountains right down to the harbour in Aberdeen. We've got 80 odd miles of river, and you can fish on the majority of that river in the fishing season, which runs from the 1st of February. So we're opening the river officially in just over a week, and it closes on the 15th of October every year. So what we do is we promote angling to the world, really, so that people can come to the River Dee and fish for those famous wild Atlantic salmon, which are an iconic species, and they're here in the River Dee.
So salmon is part of what makes the River Dee special, but I believe there are also other reasons why the River Dee is a unique environment.
Yes, the salmon really, I suppose, with my role with the River Dee, I work for the Salmon Board and I work for the River Dee Trust, but it's special in terms of what we have here, and the habitat and the mixed habitat that we have along the river, right from the tributaries where the salmon spawn and lay their eggs, the tributaries up Loch Mick, Glen Mick, which are really wild and beautiful places, as you know, in Aberdeenshire, right down to the lowlands, which are next to the city of Aberdeen. So yeah, there's lots of things that make the river special, and the people who live in and around the river like to, go for walks and enjoy the river themselves and see the river, see the nature on the river. I haven't seen a kingfisher yet, but we have kingfishers here. They're very quick. They dart past you, apparently. A lot of the anglers say looks like a blue flash. We have otters here, lots of really exciting wildlife if people are into wildlife photography, or, if people are just into wildlife watching. So the river has lots of different aspects to it, but I suppose my role is more around the angling side of it and the conservation side of it.
So what kind of conservation work is the Trust doing around the river?
If you were to look in the river, it's very beautiful and very clear in most places, unless we just had a storm and then the water comes rushing down from the mountains along the river. But the river is a beautiful river, and we must preserve that for the future. Over the years, the Atlantic salmon have become a threatened species. And this is something that is very topical with not only anglers, but around the whole ecosystem of the river. Mm-hmm. And so we need to focus on how we can protect the Atlantic salmon as well as the other wildlife I was talking about and the habitat that they live in. We've launched a campaign a couple of years ago called the 1 Million Trees campaign. And that really leads all of our habitat and conservation work that we're doing. We're planting 1 million native trees in and around the river and the tributaries that lead into the River Dee in order to protect the wild Atlantic salmon and the other nature that is linked to that. And the reason we're planting the trees is so that when the salmon are in the river at the moment, because of climate change, the temperature in the river, in the water, is moved up. And it's moved up to the point now with the climate change that actually it's threatening the species because the water is too warm, especially in the summer, especially for juvenile salmon. I'll tell you a little bit about the life cycle of them if you want to know in a few minutes. But also it helps them when they're spawning. We're also doing some other things further up in the tributaries where we're doing other conservation aspects, which will help to rewild some of the areas of the cairngorms and put them back to how they were thousands of years ago when the salmon numbers were higher.
One of the things about Aberdeenshire is that it is a very agricultural region. Over the last few hundreds of years, agricultural fields were created, woodlands were changed and have changed. We've lost trees over a variety of reasons, including Storm Arwen, which has done tremendous amounts of damage. By replanting and rewilding, it will change the landscape, but also the environment for the better.
Yeah, that's right. But also, if you were to go higher up the river, so for instance, I had a group of ladies out. What I was doing the other day, we were up in the upper reaches of the cairngorms, almost up near Lochmick in Glenmick, which is the Glenmick estate and Balmoral estate. We were talking to this group of ladies who we had out with us about our conservation and what we're doing with the trees, but also what we're doing about rewilding. And because a lot of the land management over the years has been geared around maybe, say, grouse shooting and country estates where they took some of the trees out, or where deer have been in high numbers and have maybe eaten more of the trees, or that, like you say, maybe storm damage over the years, then there is a lack of trees in various areas that there should be, that we need them to protect these wild salmon. That is one of the things we're concentrating on is putting young trees into these areas so that they will gradually form more places where nature is prevalent again. And with the trees, it brings lots of other nature back to the area. We're also putting in miles and miles of fencing to prevent deer from getting alongside the river where there are the young trees.
It's a careful balance between the landowners and the various estates and the river needs to make sure that you're planting the trees in the right places to benefit the estates and the river.
Yes, absolutely. And we are very much in consultation and in partnership with talking to the landowners and working our way through the process with them. And yeah, we're very close to landowners and, we work all of that out with them. So yeah, it's very much a joint effort. And there are other agencies involved, such as the Cairngorm National Park, for instance, and the Woodland Trust, which work with us to achieve the aims on that. And if you were to go up to, for instance, Lochmick, which is where we've been doing a lot of our work, you would see some really big, what look like big lumps of tree root sitting in the middle of the river. And these are what we call large woody structures. And we've put quite a number of these into the river over the last couple of years. And they are old tree roots and trunks, which we've put into the middle of the river so that there is shade for the juvenile salmon underneath these tree roots. Now, that's because of years gone by, there would have been trees that fell into the river naturally, whereas there aren't enough trees to do that now. So we've got to replace what they used to be with our efforts now, by copying what there would have been. That increases the nutrients in the river and it supports lots of other things such as invertebrates and what have you. So not just the salmon.
And you were going to take us through the life cycle of a salmon, because you mentioned it's important for the juveniles. We always think of salmon as being out at sea, but that's not where they lay their eggs. That process is different, isn't it?
Yeah, and I must admit, Jacqueline, having worked in tourism all these years and knew about angling and promoted angling as part of other things I've promoted for Scotland over the years, I didn't have a clue about the life cycle of salmon until I came to the job. And it's absolutely fascinating how clever salmon are as a species. If a salmon is born, as it were, in the River Dee, it has a homing instinct. So what it does is, if it's born in the River Dee, so it starts off as an egg, it spends a couple of years in the river growing up, as it were. Okay. So we kind of think it gets to the teenager stage almost. And then the instinct is for it to go out into the sea. After a couple of years in the river growing and gaining strength, then it goes out into the sea. And when it goes out into the sea, it goes through a metamorphosis, if you like, of something called smallification, where it gets ready to go from fresh water into seawater. when it gets to the sea, so it swims out past the harbour, off it goes into the big wide world, and it goes out there to feed once it's past that teenage stage and is grown up. The problem we have at the moment, though, and the reason why the numbers are declining, or one of the reasons why the numbers are declining, is because there are lots of predators potentially out there in the sea and harsh conditions. A percentage of the fish who go out, the salmon who go out into the sea, come back later in the year, and they swim back up the river because their homing instinct tells them to come back to their native river. So they come back, and they come back with a mate, hopefully, and they want to spawn and recreate the next generation in the river that they were born in.
Okay.
So what they then do is they travel back up the river. And so when you maybe see the salmon leaping, as you sometimes do at the Falls of Fuke near Banchory, which is a well-known tourism spot, isn't it, for people to stand on the bridge and watch. And sometimes you see a salmon leaping up the Fuke. Well, it's actually this happens kind of September, October, maybe into November time. And the salmon are leaping up there because they're trying to get to their spawning ground, which they do in the smaller rivers in the tributaries, such as the Fuke and the Mick and what have you. So they're trying to get up to spawn and to lay their eggs and that kind of thing. So that's the other end of the process, is for the salmon to come to the river and to spawn back in their native river. We have our priorities in making sure that we send as healthy salmon as possible out into that big wide world of the sea. So we look at the health of the river and how that protects the salmon. We do quite a lot of monitoring of size of salmon and that kind of thing as they're growing. And then we also look at providing the right environment for them to come back and to spawn. So all the way along that life cycle, really.
And so in that perspective, they spend actually the majority of their life in the river and only one season out at sea.
Yeah, sometimes two, but they go out to sea and then they come. Yeah, the percentage of them, and we wish it was a much bigger percentage, actually make it back to the river. So that's why the salmon numbers have been declining, for lots of reasons to do with the habitat, but also to do with things like predation. Yeah. So angling. The other thing I wanted to say about the salmon and angling is that the River Dee, as most of the rivers that you will hear of now in the UK, we are what we call a catch and release. We operate catch and release in the River Dee. So if our anglers, while they're doing their sport of angling, catch a salmon, a prize salmon, which is something that they'll be wanting to do, then it's catch and release. So they don't harm the salmon. They very gently and very carefully stick to our conservation code and put the salmon back into the river to swim away happily. So we don't take them home for tea anymore, and we haven't done for a very significant amount of years, in order to protect the population and so that they can carry on with what they're doing. So so it's catch and release, but that doesn't affect the sporting side of angling. The angling continues, and the quest to get a silver bar or a wild Atlantic salmon on the Dee, people who love to fish want to come and do that in their lifetime. They want to visit the famous River Dee where the British royal family go fishing and all those kind of things.
Yeah, because the River Dee does run through and along Balmoral and the Balmoral estate.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. We're actually working with the Balmoral estate at the moment, and they're quite a big landowner adjacent to the river. And there's going to be an exhibition at Balmoral. They have an exhibition every year for visitors, but they're having an exhibition this year to mark the Queen's Jubilee, which is going to be around life on Balmoral estate. So to do with the people that live and work there, but also to do with the Queen and her family and how they enjoy their time when they're on holiday at Balmoral. We're going to be having some space in that exhibition to talk about the life of Atlantic salmon and about angling, and also a bit about our habitat and conservation work. We're really excited to be asked to join in with that by the estate, and we're looking forward to being part of it after that opens on the 1st of April.
I can imagine people going to visit the exhibition will look at the river differently when they come back from Balmoral, because you have to walk across the bridge and across the River Dee on your way to visit the estate.
Yes.
But when you're coming back, you will stop and see that and actually realize that it's such an important place.
Yes, hopefully so. And part of what we do really is around education. I think one of the things I do is work with my colleague Jane, who is our education officer. And on behalf of the river, she goes out and talks to young people. She delivers sessions with schools and community groups and educates them about the river. this last year, she's managed to do 164 school visits, and she's been engaged with over 2,200 kids. But some of the kids who live in the city of Aberdeen have never, ever been to the river. They've never been to a riverbank. They've never looked at, maybe done a bit of pond dipping. They've never seen any of that in real life. So actually organising visits to the river for kids, organising visits to, some of the trout fisheries maybe that are around here, and showing children how it all works and explaining about that amazing life cycle and how in the future they can help look after the river and use it responsibly, but also be part of our trees campaign and things like that, and understand what it's all about.
It's kind of a shame because Aberdeen is flanked on both sides by rivers, so we do have relatively easy access, which is great for a lot of things, and particularly for people who come to Aberdeen. Spending time by water is important, and making sure that we enjoy those environments responsibly. We all make sure that we leave no trace and take care of where we go and visit. What would you recommend people do or be aware of, or how can we enjoy being active on or near the river and doing so responsibly?
If you wanted to come angling, I suppose we could cover the angling bit first. If you're thinking, right, okay, I've never been fishing, but I want to learn about the River Dee and I might want to go fishing. Some people do, and we get inquiries through the various hotels that are along the river, the bed and breakfasts, all the great hospitality we have. People inquire through them and then through our river office about, how can I try this Atlantic salmon fishing then? And we do have companies along the river. You can book a guiding fishing experience, so they will tog you up in all the gear that you need. So the waders, they will give you the equipment that you need in terms of a fly fishing rod, because we only do fly fishing. And they will give you some tuition and be with you and take you to a spot where you can do some guided fishing. So if you want to literally throw yourself in the deep end and learn about Atlantic salmon fishing, and you can do that. So that is an option here. If you are a seasoned angler, but you've never fished the Dee and it's on your bucket list, then, there are lots of places where you can fish. There's 47 beats, as we call them, along the river, where you can book to go and fish, and you pay to do a day's fishing, and you have a gilly who is someone who sits with you, who shows you the best place to fish, gives you hints and tips on different things, to different techniques you might want to use, different fishing flies you want to try. You can actually book to come fishing on the river if you're an experienced angler. The other thing you could potentially do is you can go wild swimming. I know wild swimming has become more topical over lockdown, hasn't it?
Yes.
Lots of my friends seem to have taken up wild swimming. It's not my kind of thing. I don't like getting cold, so it's not my kind of thing.
And it is a cold river. It does come from the Cairngorm Mountain, so it doesn't have enough time to really warm up.
Yeah, that's right. So now the wild swimming and the angling, we have to be careful that we're not wild swimming just downstream from an angler with a hook on the end of their rod. We do have to just be mindful of all of the different river users and how we can safely exist next to each other. There is a group on Facebook called the Deeside Dippers, and they are a local group who organise wild swimming. So if you fancy a dip on that, you could go and follow their Facebook page and they will let you know what they're doing, the dippers.
Yeah, which if you haven't done wild swimming before, it might be best to go with an organised environment,
yes.
Something that is going to be safe.
Yeah, I think the other thing is a safe place to swim, where would have enough depth to swim at certain times of the year, because the river can be quite shallow in some places, quite rocky, quite slippy. Whereas if you go with an organised group, you'll probably get more out of it. Of course, you can go in the river in certain places. And up at Canvas of May, we see people in the summer, don't we, going in the river all the time, having a picnic by the river, all that kind of thing. We don't fish on a Sunday by order of Her Majesty the Queen. So all the gillies get a day off on a Sunday. On a Sunday might be the better time to kayak, or might be the better time to wild swim, because there aren't going to be anglers at all. One of the things people ask me, my family are down in Yorkshire. I've been up here for 24 years and I've had my own family up here. My son was born in Aberdeen. He's a very proud Scot. But when I post pictures on social media and things of me out for a walk or out by the river or doing something in my job, people say, is it really like that where you live? You probably have the same thing, don't you? I think one of the reasons why the river and the area we live in here in Aberdeenshire is so stunning is it's the scenery, it's the raw beauty of it all. But it's also, for me, the reason why I like living here is not just the stunning scenery and the access to things and outdoor pursuits and all that kind of thing. It's the friendliness of the people who come and visit the river, the anglers who I talk to. I write a weekly fishing report in the season. Mm-hmm. So I get to find out who's caught what fish on what beat of the river. And I get emails from people who visited to tell me their stories about how much they've enjoyed their time on the Dee. And they talk about the people, and they talk about the welcome that they get when they're on the river, and they talk about the welcome they get in our local hospitality, and just how friendly and easy it is to come to the river, and how nice it is to be mixing in our local communities. And I think that's something that makes this place more special than ever for me.
You're right. Everyone's really welcoming. We are out there to enjoy ourselves and to share our environment with other people. And it's hard to go for a walk anywhere within Aberdeenshire without coming across people, and everyone says good morning and acknowledges one another and asks, where have you been? Where are you going? And has just a really quick little chat to see that you're enjoying yourself and that you are aware of everything that's around you and what's available around you.
Yeah, I think you're right with that. We're all really good, aren't we, at exchanging information with each other and giving hints and tips when we see each other about, have you been to there and have you seen that? You know, there's a good little book which we've got at home, which is about walks, and there's a book called 25 Walks from Source to Sea about the River Dee. It's a little pocket book, and we use it all the time. It's got lots of different walks in it. Some are right by the river, but others are, say, up at the Linn of Dee. Walking is something we do a lot of around here, and see other people who go out walking and enjoying the river for different reasons, you know, maybe to go walking, like you say. So yeah, so that's a really handy little book.
Well, what I'll do is I'll put a mention of that on the blog post that I write to go along with all of the podcast episodes. So I'll reference the Dee District Salmon Fishery Board and the River Dee Trust website so that people can go back and find out more information once they've listened to the podcast.
Now, I was going to say, people ask me, I do quite a lot of promotion on our social media about our fundraising initiatives through the River Dee Trust. And the River Dee Trust is a charity, and that part of my job involves fundraising. So every year we have a fundraising auction which takes place online where people can bid for different auction items. And we have a really strong relationship with lots of other local businesses who give us auction items to put in there. Our other ways that people can get involved with what the River Dee Trust does is anglers. We have a 24-hour fishing marathon that runs in June.
I was going to ask you about that because you have some famous people coming to that this year.
I came into the job, as I was saying, last April, and this was already on the books for the first time. We were doing this fishing marathon last year, and it ran at the end of June last year. People fish for 24 hours, and they fish 7 different beats of the Dee in teams of 3. So logistically, it's quite a busy thing. But you and I were talking about the weather earlier, weren't we, and how beautiful it is here sometimes. And in June, I remember standing on the river at 4 o'clock in the morning and getting a call during that marathon saying, someone's caught a fish down at Tilbury's, which is down near Maricuta. The sun was just coming up. Because it was midsummer, we don't really go dark at that time of year. So, and I just was standing there on this fishing beat, and I was up near Belogie, and it was just stunningly beautiful. And I thought, wow, you know, and the people who came fishing in that 24-hour marathon, they had to fundraise, and it was a success for lots of reasons. But yeah, the experience of coming and fishing in midsummer was something they really enjoyed, and the endurance side of it, you know, even for seasoned anglers, you know, 24 hours fishing is a big call. And we had lots of volunteers as stewards to keep people safe, and gillies working during the day and everything. So it was a great event. So we decided we'd do it all again this year.
So well, sounds like a very exciting opportunity, and I think you are looking, or potentially are looking for volunteers to help around that. But there's lots of other opportunities for people to volunteering for a day or for a project or a special event. People can get in touch and see what help is needed.
Yeah, that's right. And we do have various groups of volunteers. I mean, I was out with a group from a local community, from an organisation called the Seroptimists. They were out doing some tree planting with us. So if you want to be part of the tree planting corporate outing, if you want to do something for the environment, you can buy trees and we can plant trees at certain times of the year. We also have volunteers who help us manage some of the invasive species that we have in terms of plants that we have to keep a hold of, like Himalayan balsam, that is a bit of a problem alongside the river, and we have teams of volunteers who help us with managing that. But on our website you can also get involved with the trees campaign. Up on Glen Mick we can plant a living tribute in trees. And we have planted over 100 enclosures up there of young trees. People can sponsor. It's a special grove of 30 trees in an enclosure. People do it in legacy, in memory of someone, or people leave a legacy, and you get a grid reference and you get a certificate. And you don't put a plaque or anything on it, but you know where it is. And it's also part of the future. You know, it's a living gift almost. But they can also buy tree certificates on our website.
If you had to share one kind of memorable fact about the river, what would you share?
It's hard to actually say it in a nutshell, really. I think one of the things I would do would be to say that the perception of the river and who fishes the river is very different to actually how it is. There was a perception with me, and I think the wider world, that it's maybe older gentlemen, but actually angling is changing. And part of what Robson Green talks about, who's joining us for this year's Fishery 24, is getting younger people into fishing, getting ladies into fishing, and you know, everyone into angling and why it's good for them. One of the things I would say is that it's not just about the traditional side of what we think it is. It can be for everyone, and it can give real benefits of being outside and doing something that gets you closer to nature, but also, you know, the sport of it. You know, there's all elements to it. We've got a ladies fishing group here on the river called the River Dee Damsels, and they're leading the way. And we also run a program called Fly Fish 50 to get young people into fishing. In a nutshell, it's very hard. So I think about the river is to think, okay, it's not just an old-fashioned sport, as it were. It's something that is, you know, can suit everybody in all different walks of life. To come to this beautiful place to do it is pretty special.
Because not only will fishing and being by the river give you the opportunity to enjoy the outside environment and outside nature, but there's also growing evidence that being around what they call blue spaces is good for your mental health and wellness, because it calms you down. And when you fish, it does feel like it should be a meditative process, especially when you're fly fishing and casting.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. I mean, I've known you for quite a number of years, Jacqueline, haven't I? And I'm a 100 miles an hour person. I'm not very good at slowing down. I'd never been fishing before. So before I started this role, I went for some lessons with a local gillie, and I actually quite enjoyed it. And then I went and took part in Ladies' Day on the river in September last year. And actually, it's one thing that makes me slow down, because I'm not going to be on the phone to someone when I'm standing in the middle of a river casting. You've got to think about what you're doing. You've got to think about your balance. It's got some technical aspects. It's, you know, it gets you away from anything else. It gives you relaxation. You're out in nature, you're out with friendly people, and you're actually learning something.
Yeah. Is there anything else about the river and your work and various projects that you're involved with that we haven't talked about?
The other thing probably that is of interest now is saying that we open the river on the 1st of February. And people are probably thinking, what does Debbie mean, open the river? You know, there isn't a gate that we suddenly open. There isn't a button that we press. Yeah. So the opening has got a kind of old-fashioned ceremonial quality to it, which I really like. What we do, we have a couple of speakers, and we have people who work in and around the river, and the beat owners and things like that who come along to the river opening. So all the people who have an interest in the river come along to the river opening. And so on the 1st of February, there are a few speeches, and then we actually go down to the river at Bankery, outside the Bankery Lodge Hotel, in the middle of the river. And we have two people. This year it's going to be two young ladies who they actually raised the most money in Fishery 24 last year. So this year they have the honour of the first cast on the river. Then we actually have our guest speaker, who's a guy called Charlie McLean, who's a whiskey expert, who is going to bless the river. He has a quake, silver whiskey cup, but you hold it both sides with your dram. He's going to, you know, say a few words and then throw the whiskey on the river, and then we start fishing. We hope that's going to be a good season.
It is nice to maintain traditions and ceremony, and I think we're quite good at things like toasting the river, opening things ceremonially. So I'm looking forward to attending.
Yeah, it'll be good to see, won't it? And as I say, I think it signifies moving into a positive time again. That's even better. Looking forward to all of that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for sharing your information, telling us more about the river and the different projects that you have relating to the fishing and angling and the conservation work and how to look after it responsibly. So I'm sure this will be another really good opportunity to share more information with listeners and to give more insight about what's good about Aberdeenshire. So thank you for talking with us today.
You're really welcome. Thank you.